woodworkers. That wasn't uncommon for hundreds of years, for about 150 years there.
So one of the topics that I'm interested in is the Irish. The Irish on the Miramichi, Irish in New Brunswick, but I have been involved with the Irish Festival, especially with the cultural part and lectures and talks, and with the Provincial Archives here. But this book here is a great book called Irish Settlements in Eastern Canada, and this is by John Mannion, who's a professor at Memorial University. Now, John, what he did is he studied, and his book is on an Irish settlement, first off in Western Ireland, and then one on the Avalon Peninsula in Newfoundland, Barnaby River, New Brunswick, and Downeyville in Ontario. And he compared the farming instruments, the house design, all of that sort of thing, to each one to the other, and how they're comparable to what was in use in Ireland. Like just even the hearths and the fireplaces, for example.
There was a big Irish settlement in Newfoundland. I don't know how far back they would go.
Yeah, there's called the Irish Loop there. I think it's called the Irish Loop, just down south of St. John's.
Okay.
I may not have the right term, but
that's an interesting study, eh?
so some of there's some of the houses, there are very few in Barnaby River right now, but I remember the Hurley house back in the Ridge, when it was just before it was being demolished. I have at home some of the wooden pegs that were given to me, and some of the square nails, but basically it was put together with pegs. Anyway, the Irish, and then I'm interested in the Irish from here, and as they went on, where they went to from here. And back in 2013, I think it was, my wife and I traveled to Minnesota, Wisconsin, and we went through places like Stillwater, Minnesota, which in the subtitle it's referred to as a Miramichi town, and we went through cemeteries there, and I have hundreds of pictures of headstones, all Miramichi names, whether it's Morrissey, Foley, Dalton, Donahue, McCarthy, Daly, Tozer. Tozer wouldn't have been an Irish name, but Tozer was from Sunny Corner, and he became one of the first millionaires in Minnesota.
Did he go there for the wood?
Went there for the wood, because what happened was that in the 1850s, 1860s, that was sort of the downturn of the shipbuilding, and iron ships were coming in, so so a lot of people, there wasn't the work here, so they went to there where the woods were just opening up, and they were familiar with the techniques of what had to be done, and so that's where they went.
Well, they would have been used to cutting big wood, white pine, and whatever they have out there, I'm sure part of it was white pine. And my father's people came over in 1836, but then do you know if the immigration was steady before the Irish famine hit?
Well, if all we need to do is look at your father's book, and your father's book has a whole list here of families. He refers to them as the Irish here.
Oh yes.
And he has the year when they came. Okay. And most of them are the 1820s. Like, for example, I know that the Donahues came to Barnaby River about 1829. And the first Daniel Donahue, first I say because there's been one in succession all the way along, married Anne Ward. And Anne Ward was obviously not a Catholic, because in the church records of St. Patrick's here, we can see that she was baptized to confirm one week and married the next week to Dan Donahue.
I see. Converted to Catholicism.
We look at W.D. Hamilton's book on the Northwest, you can see that the wards up there, these are Irish wards. And so, the story is that she came in the same ship as he came on, and but definitely he came in 1829. They were married in 1831.
It looks to be steady from the 20s to the 30s, but there's not a whole lot. Like when the famine hit in 1845.
A lot of people think that the Irish came here during the famine. Well, there were some, but not that many. Like the Brackens, for example, were famine Irish, but a lot of them came after the end of the Napoleonic Wars.
Right.
In 1815, when the fighting was kind of done in Europe, and some of them, you know, the economy was good because they were providing materials, things to Europe, but then there was a downturn of work, so a lot of them left, and this area was just opening up.
Yeah.
So this was a natural place for them to come to.
And Britain itself had favorable tariff policies, I guess, for Irish local manufacturing, and then they kind of did away with that. And as you say, after the Napoleonic Wars, there was a slump in the economy, and it hit a lot of people hard in Ireland, really hard. And like in my father's family, 5 girls come over. 5 girls, and you know, in that time period, on a wooden ship where they had no accurate weather predictions, very risky.
Oh, yeah.
So things had to be pretty rough in order for to risk 5 girls to go on a timber ship over to a land as far away as we were. Things had to be pretty hard.
And like this wasn't necessarily their first location that they preferred. They always seem to want to go to America, New York or Boston or whatever.
Yeah.
But the passage to there was more expensive.
Yep.
So sometimes they became 2 boaters or even 3 boaters.
The 2 boaters.
Like the 2 boaters, they didn't have much, so they went to Newfoundland often. And from Newfoundland, maybe came to Miramichi or maybe went on to Boston. But a lot of people, but once they got here and settled here, and I see a play that Sean McCarthy and Thomas Dale are going to put on soon. I believe it's called Mullin's Boom. Mm-hmm. And Mullin's Boom was the jail in the town park in Newcastle. That's what Mullin's Boom was. And the Irish tended to want to fight a little bit.
A little
rowdy. And so the big thing is that they were in jail, and they got in a big fight in the jail and broke out of the jail as well, right? And they had to bring the military in. And it was funny, recently I just happened to meet this guy from Minnesota, and we had a good chat about the Irish and where he was from, Minnesota and Stillwater. And I said, "What is your name?" He said, "Murphy." I said, "Do you like to fight?" He said,
Murphy's in the river.
I said, "The Murphys apparently like to fight. The Murphys don't mind." But all friends the next day.
Oh yes.
You know, just got a little
it's
round.
Just the nature. I think probably, you know, back in Ireland, things were so tough. They had to at times rub elbows with someone else that was vying for the same plot of land to garden or put up a crop, or you know, to be a tenement farmer. And probably, you know, things were so rough and resources were so few that you had to be kind of tough skinned to survive.
That's right.
So, you know, and there was a lot of the British tried to take over the island for a long time, and you know, rough times in Ireland, 1820s, 30s, 40s, just terrible times, things that we can't even imagine. Like, you know, there was no unemployment, there's no welfare, there was no any of that stuff. You either lived or you died. If you lived, you had to have money from your family, or you earned it yourself. That's
in Ireland, in the countryside, there's all these rock walls going everywhere and anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I remember being there one time, and I asked, you know, what is the story in those exactly? Like, they said, well, the real thing is that the people were starving to death, basically, and there was kind of the dole, but the people didn't want to work for nothing, so they employed them building these rock walls, and at least it gave them a sense of a purpose.
Right.
Instead of sitting home doing nothing and basically thinking about starving to death, it gave them something to do. And that's what these rock walls are all about. Yes, they're pastures and stuff, but they, you know, the poor tenement farmer, that's what he worked at.
You know, I've seen some indication that the landlords at the time in 1830s, 40s roughly, that the economy was roughly £4 million, but £1 million were taken off the island by absentee landlords.
Oh yeah, because the land was owned by the British, basically the nobles, And they, I have some different pictures that shows them coming in and tearing the house right down, right up.
Well,
throwing them out.
the landlord would say, okay, it's cheaper for me to pay your passage to America than, kind of carry you on for a few years. So a lot of them paid their way and said, see you later, bye-bye. And of course, many of them never came back. And it was cheaper for them to pay the one-time fee than to carry them over a little bit for a few years when the potato famine was going on.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
The class system at that time was just something right out of the medieval times that we would identify with now. It's just incredible. Just incredible. So do you have any idea, of course, up in the Renews area and the Dungarvan and Barnaby and Nelson, or of course in Chatham, what is it that attracted Irish people to those certain areas? Was it just, okay, a family came here and then they knew a family was there that was Irish and they just collected themselves as a whole, or was it just
the first Irish that came, I'll say the first Irish, the largest number, came in the early 1800s. I'll just say 1810. Like Rankin and Gilmore were in Douglastown in 1812, I believe it was, and they were Scottish, but most of their employees were Irish, and so the Irish, they came to work either in the woods or at the mills. But when they came, the land along the river, the main river, was gone. The Scottish already taken up by the Scottish
and the Loyalists.
The Loyalists. So the only places for them to, they worked in the mills, but then they saw maybe a chance to become a farmer. Well, then they applied for grants, but the grants, the only ones left were on the side backs, either the back lots, second or third tier, or on the smaller rivers like the Barnaby, the Bay of Inn, the Barty Bow, the Renews, the Bartholomew, the Dungarvan.
Yep.
So that's where they went to. And like I know the Daniel Old Donahue, his grant was something like 92 acres on the Barnaby. And then you can see where probably his son got one on Semi-Wagon Ridge in the 1840s.
Right.
So anyway, that's where they went to, and eked out a living by having a house, which they built pretty I won't say barren, but rustic, out of logs, and then they would send some logs down, either down the river, or else other mills came up, like for example in Barnaby River was the Gill's Mill, and you can even see, I can even see from my father's time in 1920, where he worked at Gill's Mill store, but the money he earned he had to spend at the store.
Yes.
So that was in those days, but
portable sawmills came into practice. Even some steam-driven ones were brought into the woods. I mean, if the money was to be had by cutting timber, they got timber. And the original homesteaders, you think they got there and it was just a nice pasture and voila, we put up a log home, but they had to clear this place.
That's right.
With a crosscut saw or an axe, and then peel the logs, and then cut them on the ends to fit each other. Meanwhile, you had to have some way to feed yourself or yourself and your family. Huge obstacles just to get started. It's enormous.
Any planting that they did was between the tree stumps at first.
Right.
And eventually you see them burning they probably even had to burn some of the stumps because they couldn't get the stumps out.
Right.
But one of the requirements of having the land, you can see where they petitioned for land, I will say, in 1832, but they really didn't get it until maybe 1835 or 37, where they showed that they actually cleared some of the land, and so many acres that they would have had to clear each before they were given the actual grant.
And I read where in Douglastown it was mainly Scots Loyalists, the first wave of settlers there, and along came the Irish, and I think it was Rankin that the Irish came in, and they were Catholic, and the people before them were mainly Protestant. And it's hard for us to imagine, but at the time there was a real, I'd say, suspicion and fear from both sides to the other side based on religion. But Rankin rose above that and built a school for Catholic families to go to. They were welcome, so there was some animosity between the religions, but there was also some people that rose above that and basically said, you have a right to your own conscience of religion, and I'm still going to employ you, and I'm going to look after you to the best that I can.
Yeah, Rankin was pretty good guy, and he was good to, pretty fair to all the employees, and I know that we'll take the Siemens Hospital, for example, that was built in 1830. There were times there where they did benefits for the poor of the Highlands of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
They were going through the same things that the Irish were.
Yep.
And they did things for the Irish to send money, and they also, like, I think it was 1848, I'll say, there was a smallpox epidemic with the indigenous people, and they raised money to give to the indigenous people to help medication or whatever, and I think pretty sure that Rankin was thought of highly by the indigenous people.
Yeah. So we had some great leaders in this area, and a lot of them were Scottish, a lot of them were Irish too. And as you said, just over in Beaubears Island, if you want some history there, that's an enormous island for history, starting with First Nations, and there is some idea that even the Vikings come over around 1000 AD, and then the French come over, and then the Scottish come over, the British, and then the Irish, and it continues on. Now we're getting immigration from outside the area, and it's always been an area of people come from away, as they would say in Newfoundland, people that immigrated from other places. And it's a place that I like, because it has a great variety of people, a great variety of mentalities, and it's welcoming to people for a long, long time. That's what I like about the Miramichi,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And we don't judge people. We don't often understand everything about the other, nationalities or ethnic groups, but oftentimes we'll welcome them, and because we know all of us came from somewhere else. That's the way it was with New Brunswick, and especially Miramichi, where it was more closed society, where it wasn't as open to, say, St. John and Fredericton were to the influence of the U.S. This was a more closed area because at the time, way back then, we didn't have railroads, we didn't have great roads to go from here to Fredericton or St. John, so we grew up kind of in our own little pocket of civilization. And as we got different people, then we got different people, and it was an area that welcomed them because we all realized we're all come from a ways.
That's right. And my mother would say, we all have the same color of blood.
Not true,
No matter what you look like.
Yes, sir.
We all have the same color of blood.
Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, I know that I'm interested in the history of the Miramichi, and I think Friends of Beaubears Island, this location here is a wonderful spot, and I certainly hope that the city realizes the importance of what we have here, of built heritage in the Miramichi, and because sometimes when you're right here in the location, you lived here all your life, you don't see the significance. But you go other places and you see built heritage that they have, we
Right.
say, well, gee, we have that back in the Miramichi, why don't we take care of that better? Do something more with that.
Even biologically, if you walk down the center of that island, the white pine, I call it the white pine cathedral. It's just awe-inspiring how big these trees are and how much it calms the mind. I don't know how else to say that. And add the history to that. I mean, this to me is the jewel of the Miramichi River, right there. and it's it's ours to look after, and we should support it more, as you say, because the history is there for going back a long, long time. So let's, as citizens, support it. Let's explore it. Let's find out what we can do to support it and other areas on the river as well. I mean, we have so much history here. We should acknowledge this history for all the different groups and say, yes, we are good. We are really good at doing this. We're really good at people. People from away really recognize the people of Miramichi as welcoming, as friendly people. And we're often compared to Newfoundlanders that we're so friendly. So let's emphasize that, look at our history and accept the history and go forward and promote ourselves and promote our history, whether it's Scottish, Irish, First Nations, Acadian, whatever. Let's go forward and be proud of who we are and what we've come from and what we've built here as a civilization. That's what I want. That's what I hope we get out of the next 20 years.
Well, I agree. Anyway, thank you very much for
thank you,
letting
Cyril.
me be here. All right. And our host is Robbie back on the scene.
Well, isn't that
She's doing a
convenient, eh?
wonderful job.
Nice of you to show up there, Nikki.
I'm sorry, gentlemen.
So we're going to sign off now.
We'll
And
sign
she
off.
was called away to business, but she's back now, and she's going to push the off button there, and off we go. And we thank you for your time.